Let's go ahead and read 2 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 3. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal heirs. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Azariah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from among the king's sons who were being murdered. And they hid him and his nurse in the bedroom from Athaliah, so that he was not killed. So he was hidden with her in the house of the Lord for 6 years while Athaliah reigned over the land. All right, so the person under consideration for the time that we have is going to be this one who is called Jehosheba. And as Preston mentioned earlier, when you start trying to kind of map out the family tree of some of these people, it becomes quite a challenge. The tricky part in the fact that you have Jehoram of Israel, you have Jehoram of Judah. You have the connections that go back to Ahab, the connections that go back to Jezebel. You have these kings who continue to rule even as they would have, and then in the middle of all of it, you find this one individual who wants to do what's right. And when you start thinking about who her family was, it's quite shocking to see somebody who would be willing to put their own life on the line to save this child, even because, I mean, if she would have been caught in this, what do you suppose would have happened to her? If Jehosheba would have been caught in the fact that she was taking away one of these sons that were being slain, what do you suppose would have happened to her? She would have likely been slain, right? So one of the things that you notice when you come into these chapters of 2 Kings is it's pretty much a bloodbath. In all honesty, there is so much blood that is found within these chapters, because even if you jump back just a couple of chapters and you start seeing how Jehu, when he's anointed king, and then he comes in and he begins to slay the entire house of Ahab, and you're going to see these 70 sons that are killed. You see how Jezebel is killed. You see how all these other connections to the family of Ahab and Jezebel, they're all slaughtered. Well, she's right in the big mix of all of this. And remember, we talked about this individual's father this morning. When we read about King Jehoram of Judah, was he a good king? He was not a good king. Not at all. Well, when you think about Ahaziah, Ahaziah is not a good king either. Well, here's where she fits into the picture. Jehoram of Judah is her father. All right, so she has a fatherly figure who is a very bad influence on her life. Well, then her mother, or stepmother, we'll say, is Athaliah, who is mentioned here in this text. Well, Athaliah is the sister to Joram, the king of Israel. All right, so you have all these connections that are going on here. And now Athaliah is one we see obviously in the text. Once her son Ahaziah is killed by Jehu, her immediate response is to slaughter all the heirs. Not a very good influence. So everybody around her is just killing whoever they may to hold on to their place of authority or to this position of, for this sake, kingship. And then you have Jehosheba in the middle of it, one who is willing to show courage even in the face of danger. She showed remarkable bravery by risking her own life to save her nephew Joash from Queen Athaliah's murderous purge. Now, I didn't think about it until this morning, but as we were going through in Preston's class, and what was Jehoram's response to his siblings? He kill him, right? So she's already witnessed this firsthand. Her own brothers were killed in this onslaught from Jehoram and all the murderous things that he did in killing off all these brothers of his. And she would have been privy to those things. She would have known about these things. So her first response in this is not tuck, tail, and run, but rather, you know what, I'm going to protect one of these. I'm going to protect one. And even as we stated, her protecting one of them could have easily come at the cost of her life. I can't help but to think about some of the verses, even as Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you to be strong and of good courage? Do not be afraid. You think about how challenging it would have been to actually make the decision, you know what, I'm going against my stepmother. I'm going against all the rest of the people, and I'm going to actually pull this one child out, and I'm going to put them in a place where they will be protected. and save that child's life. It took great courage for her to pull him aside and put him in a place where he would continue to live. Now, when you think about verses like, if somebody will, read Proverbs 31, verses 8 through 9. Proverbs 31, verses 8 through 9. And think about the responsibilities that we all have individually. It may not come in the same manner as what we see in this text. It may not come at the case that somebody's fixing to slaughter all the heirs and we're trying to slip in and save one of the children. But nonetheless, what is said here in Proverbs 31, verses 8 through 9?
Open your mouth for the speechless in the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy.
Right, so there are those who are going to be less fortunate. There are those who are going to be in need and ultimately maybe not able to help themselves. And even within the instruction of God, we're to be that kind of people who are willing to step out of maybe our comfort, to step into a situation that might cause us some sort of backlash, but nonetheless, take the opportunity to show courage, even if it were in the face of danger. Right? That's the first notable thing that we can pull from Jehosheba and her willingness to pull this young son, Joash, away. And ultimately, Joash is her nephew. Right? So that's the family connection there. So one thing we could say about her is she is courageous even in the face of danger. But I think another important lesson that we can pull from this, and it very much applies for us today, is that she shows faithfulness to God over family loyalty. Faithfulness to God over family loyalty. Because this is her stepmother who is now executing all of these young boys to make sure that she can hold on to this position of authority so nobody can actually take the throne. And if you're this stepdaughter, you could easily say, you know what, well, she's going to take the throne. I'm going to buddy up to her and I'm going to make sure that I stay on her good side and I'll get all the rewards that come from it. Or maybe you just say, you know what, I'm not going to get in the middle of this even though I know this is wrong. I'm just going to keep my distance and do nothing so you don't even have to chance any kind of anything coming your way. When it comes to family, how often have you been put in a situation where maybe family wanted you to do something that you knew was not godly, or wanted you to be involved in something that you knew was not godly? Do you have the courage to stand up even to family and say, you know what, this is not the kind of life that I'm going to live. This is not the kind of things that I'm going to subject my children to. Right? That's maybe one area where we could see it in our lives still today. She was loyal to God, not to human family ties or corrupt leadership. And really kind of the lesson that we can take from that is that true faith may require us to make hard decisions and stand against ungodly influences, even if those ungodly influences are our blood family. Just because it's a family tie does not make it okay to step into areas that are sinful against God. We have to be willing to take that stand against it. Somebody read, if you will, Matthew chapter 10 and verse 37. Matthew chapter 10 and verse 37. Matthew 10 and verse 37.
He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me.
And really what's being said is you have to hold God in the proper place of preeminence in your life, and you cannot have anybody that is an earthly tie that's going to stand in that position between you and God, that you have to be willing to exalt Him first. Well, let's say family decides, you know what, we're going to go and do this thing or we're going to go and do that thing, and you get the call and family says, hey, why don't you come with us? And you know it's not a good thing for you to do as a child of God. What's going to be your response? Will you sit down with family and say, look, this is just not something we do, not something we're going to participate in? And even if it came at the cost of cutting a family tie, are you willing to do that for your relationship with God? You see, Jehosheba was more concerned about what was right in God's eyes than what was right in her family's eyes, or even in this leading figure as king or queen, I guess, Athaliah now. So she was willing to cut ties even there if it meant to protect this boy's life. You know, a good example of making sure that you put God first over family. Years ago, there was a baptism that took place right here in this baptistry of an individual who was met through one of the various works of the congregation. And this individual was baptized and then came to a couple of services, and then the mother of this person said, you know what, you continue to worship there, I will cut you from your inheritance. I will disown you. You know what happened? They never came back. They were more attached to family than they were to God. Right? We have to face these decisions on a regular basis. Maybe we just don't see it to this degree because it's not at this scale of someone losing or not losing their life. But nonetheless, you make decisions on a daily basis that show your faithfulness to God, and you have to be willing to do that. When we go well out of our way to make sure that our children are put in positions where they can thrive spiritually, that's sacrifice on our part to make sure that they're going to be there so that they can be close to God. That's a great thing. That's a beautiful blessing. But we don't often compare it in the same fashion, thinking about, okay, well, it was courageous for her to put her life on the line. And maybe we see things as such as someone who's willing to bring their little ones and have them surrounded by spiritually minded people. We see that as something little, but truly that is a beautiful thing. That is a wonderful thing to bring up our children as God would have us to bring them up. So she showed faithfulness over her family loyalty, showed faithfulness to God over family loyalty. A third lesson, I'm going to keep this shorter than our normal ones. I know we just had a big meal. We had dessert. We had all the goods. We're tired. We want a nap. I get it. So I'll keep this a little bit shorter. All right, one more lesson we could take from her. Wisdom and discretion. She not only saved Joash, but she hid him in the temple, working with her husband Jehoiada, the high priest. Now, if you pick up and continue to read in verse 4, in 2 Kings chapter 11, it says, in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and brought the captains of the hundreds and the bodyguards of the escorts and brought them into the house of the Lord to him. And he made a covenant with them and took an oath from them in the house of the Lord and showed them the king's son. All right, so now you're bringing in all these other people who are now going to be essentially standing guard and protecting this child also. And here you have Jehoiada, the high priest, who's going to bring them in and say, look who we have here. And he's going to introduce now this boy to all these other people. Well, Jehoiada is the husband of Jehosheba. Verse 5, then he commanded them, saying, this is what you shall do. 1/3 of you who come on duty on the Sabbath shall be keeping watch over the king's house. 1/3 shall be at the gate of Sur, and 1/3 at the gate behind the escorts. You shall keep watch of the house, lest it be broken down. And essentially, it's going to continue to explain how these people, how these groups are going to come in, and they're going to protect this boy and make sure that he stays safe. You could add in there even a thought, or at least the principal application or the principal lesson. You think about who it was that we talked about earlier that married Jezebel and Ahab's daughter, and the impact that it had on them. Right? King Jehoram of Judah was married to Jezebel and Ahab's daughter, and look how badly it went. Well, now you have one who's still in the midst of that family, Jehosheba, but she marries the high priest, Jehoiada. And now the two of them are working together for the good rather than the two of them working together for the bad. Right? So another lesson in that. But nonetheless, when she decides, okay, well, we're going to pull this boy out and we're going to protect him, do you find it interesting where they took him to protect him? Took him to the temple. Why do you suppose the temple was the choice place to take this child? Last place Athaliah was going to go. Right?
She knew they wasn't going to be there.
She wasn't going to be there. This is the obvious place to take the child. Take him to the temple. None of her group, she's not going to be there. So this is just the best place to take this child. But listen, this was something that came through wisdom. This is something that came through discretion. This was not just a rash move. This was something they thought out, and the best plan, best case scenario, was put the child in the temple, put guards around the temple to protect this child. And all of this was, it seems, originated in the mind of Jehosheba. And then she, with her husband, Jehoiada, put this plan into action. So wisdom and discretion definitely seen in the choices that they made. Proverbs chapter 2, verses 10 through 11 says, Proverbs chapter 2, verses 10 through 11, when wisdom enters your heart and knowledge is pleasant to your soul, discretion will preserve you, understanding will keep you. Their choices were wise, and they were able to get this child into a place of safety. One of the bigger lessons, and this will be the fourth and final one that we'll take from this text, and I don't even really know how much she knew that she was actually doing this, but protection of God's promises. Because what's at stake here when you start thinking about who's being killed off? Now we're getting into the Davidic line. Right? And we talked about even the promises were made by God to King David about this kingdom that would continue to last forever, and about how there would always be this lineage that would be pointing to the Christ. Well, this is somebody trying to end that royal line. And now you have this woman stepping in and protecting this one boy who is actually part of that Davidic line and saving that promise. Now, I don't know if she actually had any idea that that's what she was doing, but nonetheless, God was able to use her good heart and her willingness and her courage to step in and do something in this moment that would impact not only her, that would impact not only this child, but also all the way to the Christ and even for us today. And maybe it seems like a small thing, something that was by somebody who was maybe not really seen as one who would just jump in and do this great courageous thing. But nonetheless, by her choices, now you have the Davidic promise being protected. You have the seed of Christ being protected, all through the decisions that were made by this individual. She became an instrument in God's redemptive plan, even though her role was behind the scenes. And really the lesson we could take from that is that small faithful acts of obedience can have eternal impact. Again, you go back even to the effort that we put forth toward our children, to our grandchildren, to make sure that they're surrounded by godly people, to make sure that they're learning about God's Word, about Jesus, about the love that God has for them. When we're willing to make those kind of sacrifices and make sure that they're there to learn these things, it has eternal impact on them because they're learning God's truths. God uses people who are willing to serve Him no matter how quiet or hidden their work may seem. She might have been the less likely to be the hero, right, in these verses, in most people's eyes. But nonetheless, with her care, with her love, her willingness to step up and to do something when nobody else would, protected not only this boy's life, but also protected the promises of God. And through her obedience and her faithfulness, God was able to use her for things that went well beyond her lifetime. And there's great lessons that can be found in that. You know, you think about it, the opportunities that we have today, and maybe we don't always think about these things that we do on a daily basis as great feats in our life or as great victories, because maybe the decisions that we make that impact others, we think they're small, we think they're insignificant. But nonetheless, it's not the case that, I've seen somebody here recently make a post, and it was a guy I went to school with. He said, I had it pulled up and then it left me. He said this: Abraham didn't offer Isaac every day. Daniel didn't jump into a lion's den every day. Peter didn't walk on water every day. Extraordinary situations require great, even risky steps of faith, but discipleship most often looks like a seed-sized faith that seeks God's wisdom just for the day, to live, to work quietly in love, and to honor God in the simple habits of life. Right? Even in the smallest and the most simple decisions that we make throughout our lives, we're still taking the opportunity to honor God. Now, would we have the courage to stand up in the big times against our family? Would we have the courage to stand up against those who are our blood relatives, maybe, who want us to do something we know that is displeasing to God? Will we have the courage to stand up for the one true church, even if we have family that says, no, you can go wherever you please? Will we have the courage to reach out to others, even if they are involved or mixed up in those denominations? That we have the courage to put our children in places that will help them to grow spiritually? We see all these wonderful qualities in this person who's only mentioned in a couple of verses. And another one of those kind of unseen heroes that we don't often talk about, but nonetheless we can learn a lot from. Maybe it's the case that we struggle with some of those opportunities. Maybe we need to pray for courage. I know I have had a handful of opportunities in the past that I was like, you know what, I should have done this, or I should have done that. Learn from those and be the one who will stand up for God's word, stand up for Him, and also take the opportunity to help the less fortunate and those who are in need. Maybe it's the case you have a need this evening. If it's so, let it be known as together we stand and as we sing.